Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to the Sabbath Show. We're back for the round 22 preview, where I do all my tips and predictions. We've only got 2 weeks left in the regular season, which is crazy to say, but it's brilliant we've got this far, given all the COVID problems we've had, especially in the last few weeks. But let's just dive right into this week's slate of games. We start on Friday night, tomorrow night. GWS are playing Richmond in what is probably one of the most intriguing matches of the round. GWS and Richmond are both vying for a top 8 spot. And quite honestly, I think this is a 50-50 matchup. Both teams are coming off pretty important victories. The Giants did so against a much stronger outfit in Geelong, a much more proven outfit in Geelong, whereas the Tigers did so against the bottom-ranked North. So take that for what you will. But the Giants, as I mentioned in my recap, huge win last week. They had a ton of players out. They get Josh Kelly back in this week. Brilliant news for GWS in the sense that he re-signed a mammoth deal. I think it was 6 years or 8 years. So that'll see him out for the rest of his career, pretty much. But look, I think this is going to be a really good game. Although I think, given the Giants last week, the resilience they showed, facing adversity, a lot of players out, had lost the week before. They had some patchy form, but, they came out, hungrier, and, deservedly won the game. As for the Tigers, they started much slower. I mean, based off the first half performance, they didn't deserve to win, but then they just piled on the goals. And showed how good of a side they can be when they're at their best. The problem is they haven't been at their best too much in the last 2 months. That was probably their second win in about 8 weeks. So they aren't in the greatest form. And for that reason, I'm going to say GWS, they're getting players back this week. And they did well without a lot of their personnel last week. So I think they've proven it. They've proven they can beat a big side, and they can be a danger side if they make the 8. So I'm going to say the Giants, but I think Richmond can give them a run for their money. Hawthorn play the Dogs, and both sides are coming off some form that we probably didn't expect. We expected the Hawks to lose last week and the Dogs to win last week, and it's gone the other way around. The Hawks are in a fair bit of good form. They've won a couple games in a row now, alongside that D's draw probably a month ago. As for the Dogs, they beat Adelaide comprehensively about 2 weeks ago, but then came out against the Bombers and was stunned. Peter Wright, 7 goals and whatnot, dampening the mood for them. And then, Josh Bruce going down the final 10 seconds of the game, which is just agonising, as I said in my recap. I'm interested to see how they replace Bruce, because they had such a good forward dynamic down there. They missed Cody Waitman last week from what I've heard, so he'll be back in this week. It's going to be interesting to see what the young Hawthorn forward line can do, given we saw what Peter Wright did to them last week. We will see whether their inexperience gets to them and the Dogs take control, or it's the other way around, because we know the Dogs are missing Alex Keith as well. So it'll be interesting to see whether they put Shaki in the forward line to compensate for the Bruce loss, or keep him in the back line to compensate for the Keith loss. But look, this is another game at UTAS. Hawthorn have played fairly well down there this year, showing competitiveness, and I think they're going to show that again. They're going to keep up the form. However, I don't think they're going to be strong enough for the Dogs. I think the Dogs, I keep saying their midfield's just powerhouse week after week. I think their defensive and forward lines have weakened a little bit in the last few weeks, but I still think their midfield's going to, compensate for that and put up an absolutely stellar performance. Cats play the Saints, and as we mentioned earlier, the Cats coming off a pretty poor showing against the Giants. Could be a decisive factor in where they sit in 2 weeks' time. And for the Saints, this is a win that somehow has brought them back into the finals conversation. They had a brilliant win against Sydney. They look very cohesive, very dangerous. Pretty much, the side that we saw last season. A side that was built on pressure and fast breaks and stuff like that. Really caught the Swans defense off guard at times. But look, I think there's some very positive signs for the Saints. Whether they can back it up against the Cats is going to be the real question. I think the Cats' defense is going to shut down Max King. Max King's kicked a couple bags in the last 2-3 weeks, which is really good for the Saints and their future. But look, I think the Cats, they've got a wealth of experience, and they're proven to make it difficult for, offensive players to catch fire. So I think the Saints are going to struggle here. The Cats, they showed a few flaws last week. I think Isaac Smith will be back in this week. I'm not 100% sure though. Jeremy Cameron's clear to play, so that's another thing they've got to worry about. I don't know who's going to go to Hawkins or Cameron, and they've got Radaglia as well. So that is a very tall forward line for the Saints to cope with, and they don't have too many tall options. So you may see a couple changes on the selection table to help with that, because they're not a tall back line. They're pretty weak back line, pretty decimated back line. But in saying that, I think the Saints can put up a good fight, but I think the Cats are too strong. 4:35, Port are playing Carlton. Look, I think Port are getting the job done here. Carlton dished up another shit performance that made me ashamed to be a Carlton supporter. The Power, look, they had a pretty rough win, if that's the correct wording for it. I think they consider themselves lucky to win against the Crows. They just snatched it off them in the last quarter. And even then, they just held on. They're pretty close to being a fully fit side, which is a really positive sign for the Power, given they've had a pretty shit run in terms of injuries. The Blues, it's been a big week. Murphy is going to play his last game for the club, and Brody Kemp is going to play his first game for the club. Hopefully, we can send Mark Murphy off in brilliant fashion and pick up a win, but I don't think that's going to be the case. I think Port are just going to be too strong. They are a very good side at the Adelaide Oval, so I'm going to tip the Power to win this one by a few goals. One of the two matchups with an undetermined venue is the Lions and the Pies, and the Pies dished up a pretty lethargic performance last week. They had an opportunity to win this one against the Hawks, but they just did not come out with any assertiveness. They were struggling kicking goals. Their delivery inside the forward 50 was Carlton-like. It was just really trash, not tactical in any way. They turned the ball over a lot, which really, put them at a major disadvantage defensively, because they were getting killed on the break and couldn't, stop the Hawthorn outnumbers. The Lions played Freo last week, and it was a pretty convincing win. And look, they look like a very good football side, I'll tell you that much. They were just making things look very easy, especially given the conditions. You'd think it'd be a little bit harder for goals to come around, but they kicked 18 of those. So they look very dangerous, especially at ground level. Cockatoo adds another threat inside the forward 50 as if they don't have enough of those. And Dane Zorko was brilliant. So look, I think Brisbane are going to be strong here. I think they're going to win this one. They punished a pretty young Fremantle side that were pretty much costly with their mistakes. For the majority of the match, there were turnovers everywhere. And Brisbane punished them. And Collingwood are fielding a very similar side in terms of youth. They had a lot of mistakes last week too. So if they put up a performance like that one against Hawthorn last week, I think Brisbane are going to make this very ugly for the Pies. North play Sydney this week, and North were humbled last week by Richmond. Sydney, they lost to the Saints in what was probably a reality check for them, that they aren't perfect, because they were in an amazing run of form. They lost Mills again, and he may be out this week. So obviously he's a vital part to the Swans midfield. North showed once again how much they've improved in the first half last week, but then, their inexperience came through, and they ran out of gas. That Richmond football side was just too classy for them. They couldn't handle the pressure, as I said in my recap. But look, I think the Swans are going to bounce back. I predicted them to win their last 4 games. They've obviously stuffed that prediction up for me. But in saying that, I think they can bounce back against the North side. That'll also be very hungry for another win. But yeah, I think Sydney are just going to be too good. They've shown what they can do to sides below them on the ladder. So I think they will repeat that and they will win this one. The D's play the Crows, and the Crows have had a mammoth week in the media for the wrong reasons this week. The Tex Walker apology, I don't know where his future lies. And also they've gotten rid of Lynch, or delisted Tom Lynch, essentially not giving him a contract. And this morning they did the same with Daniel Talia. So 2 fairly big names over the last decade for the Crows will not be on their list next year. So you can probably expect some contending teams to have a look at, picking one of those guys up. But they lost last week valiantly against the Power. Probably pretty stiff to not get the win in this one. They led for the whole game, as we've mentioned. But yeah, they've had a pretty rough second half of the year. Struggled to get wins. Yeah, they've had a few injuries as well. But look, there's a few takeaways you get from the Crows this year. Laird, that switch into the midfield, which was sort of happening last year. Ben Keys as well, he's been huge for them. And I guess the continued development of their keys, both in the forward line and in the back line. I think that's really important for them. But for the D's, they did what they had to do against the Eagles. It wasn't pretty. It was a pretty ugly night, It was scrappy. The game got halted to a lightning strike. That's how hectic that game was. But yeah, the D's got the job done. And I think they're just going to do what they have to do against the Crows pretty convincingly. It's at the G. They love it there. So I think they will, enjoy a pretty strong victory in this matchup. Essendon play the Suns. Essendon, big win last week. The Suns also won last week. The future was looking pretty dire for the Suns and Stuart Dew. And for Essendon, well, their finals hopes looked a bit up in the air. But, they just had to fuel it a little bit by getting a big win against the Dogs. And in this one, I believe that the Bombers are going to win. They do their business against the lower ranked sides, as you should, especially in the latter half of the season when wins like this are heightened, the importance is heightened. So I think they're going to know the expectation. They're going to know that they can make finals, and they're going to win this one. But then again, apparently David Teague said that Carlton knew the expectations, and that's what contributed to the loss. So let's hope that for the Bombers' sake, it doesn't end up like that. But I think they'll win this one. And to end it off, Fremantle playing West Coast, the Western Derby. This is very intriguing. The Dockers, they don't have Brayshaw this week, so their midfield is going to be very, very depleted. It's going to be interesting to see what they run out. Chera's probably the best midfielder they've got, and Mundy. So it'll be those two probably getting a lot of the footy. And for West Coast, it's going to be interesting to see who Hutchings goes to, because he probably would have gone to Brayshaw. Whether he goes to Chera is, I don't know. But yeah, I didn't really see much of their game on Monday night. But look, they had a comeback, and it wasn't successful. So it's pretty clear that they're a bit off the mark right now. But I think they're going to win this one against Fremantle. I just think Fremantle too depleted. And they're, as I mentioned in my recap, their ruck key tall situation is just really cooked. There's no, in basketball terms, you call it spacing. It's like having two big men, two centers that can't shoot the 3 ball on your court. Like, it just doesn't work. And it sort of felt the same, just players running into each other, just failing to be a presence or a target inside the 50 that looked dangerous. And I think West Coast are going to have a field day with that, with McGovern down there and Barras. Is Barras playing? Yeah, I think so. But Hearn's also out. He's just had a horror run of injuries. Yeah, But I think West Coast are just going to be too strong for the Dockers. I think there's some flaws that the Dockers need to iron out. And for this game, I think if they don't iron those out, yeah, they're going to be punished because they look to be very exposed in the Brisbane Lions clash last week, where they got punished for mistakes and terrible ball use. Anyway, that's the recap. I hope you enjoyed this one. Make sure to like the video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to the channel for more stuff like this. You can see all my other stuff on my channel in playlists and whatnot. But anyway, as I said, hope you enjoyed this one. Have a great day, and I will see you for the next one. Peace out.